Well, good evening, and welcome to the Commemorative Air Force Warbird Tube webinar for this evening. I'm your host, Steve Buss, and tonight we will be looking at the Stearman PT-17, another of our featured 12 planes of Christmas. We're certainly glad that you can join us this evening, and remember, if you have any questions during our presentation, just type them into the chat box, and we'll save some time at the end to get those questions answered. So joining me now from the CAF DFW wing is Wing Leader Keith Barrett from beautiful Caddo Mills, Texas. And if you don't know where that is, get out your map, right?
Yes.
Keith, tell us a little bit about how you got involved in aviation.
Well, it started a long time ago. I was about 4 years old, and a flight of P-51s flew over my house going into Allegheny County Airport, coming back from Korea. And I looked up at these airplanes, and I told my dad right there, I said, I want to do that. I want to be a pilot. And so for the next few years, that's all I thought about. We had nothing to do with aviation when I was a child. And but my dad did say I had to go to the West Point for pilots, which, as it just turned out, they were starting the Air Force Academy, and I ended up at the Air Force Academy, started their parachute team there, started my flying career there, did Air Force flight instruction. I did 30 years at the airlines at American, and then retired. I was flight instructing, and CAF was moving their headquarters to Dallas. And I accompanied Congressman Hall to an event and met the CAF for the first time. I don't know why I didn't do it over the previous 50 years. And really impressed with the number of people there. And the rest is history. I ended up at the DFW wing, and now I'm the wing leader.
There you go. And one of the airplanes that you have in your hangar is the Stearman that we're going to talk about tonight. Let's get into a little background on the airplane itself and the man who created it.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and start with this. Lloyd Carlton Stearman. He born back in 1898, and he was designed and built airplanes. He was founder of the Stearman Aircraft Corporation. Built the Stearman PT-17, Model 75 Cadet. And it became the primary aircraft for training the World War II pilots. It started prior to World War II, and by the time the war was over, they had built 9,783 of them. And at the war's end, there were thousands and thousands of airplanes that were left to be sold on the civilian market. There's a picture of him. He's an interesting looking character. A little more of the history of the Stearman Company. It's founded in 1927. And in 1929, he joined up with United Aircraft Transport Corporation and Boeing to create an airline company that made airplanes. Well, that got the notice of the government. So in 1934, there was an antitrust that forced the split, and Boeing took over the Stearman operation and was building the Model 75 Cadet, which makes it a Boeing aircraft, beginning the long line of Boeing airplanes that still go in production today. So again, as I said earlier, they were chosen to be the entry level for pilot training, the PT-17, and then after the PT-17, they would go to the BT-15-13 or the AT-6 SNJ for the Navy and continue on with their advanced aircraft after that. So anything else on that you want me to expound on?
Sure. About how many hours would a cadet have in a Stearman before they would move on to the BTs?
That was interesting. I talked to an old pilot who was in it, and he was pretty much, if you lived through 10 hours or so, you were probably considered a pilot. When I say live through, they had quite a few losses during that time, and the airplane's difficult to fly, but 10, 15 hours, and as the war progressed, they were pumping them out fast. If you read some of the history of the pilots, they a lot of time they were just told, get in the airplane, this does this, this does that, go fly. And if they lived through that, then they were checked out.
So what are some of the challenges when you're in the cockpit? I mean, I know ground loops are almost inevitable in the Stearman.
Yes, when I'm teaching people to fly the airplane, I tell them that you start flying the airplane when you get the start button, start the engine, and you quit it when you hit shut the engine off. The rest of the time you're flying it, because this airplane can be very unforgiving. As you can see in the picture, it is a tail dragger. And for physics, the center of gravity is behind the wheels, behind the front main gear. With that, it creates a bit of instability. It's an unstable platform. So if the tail section of the airplane starts drifting one way or the other, and with this airplane, it's prevalently the tail will drift to the right, nose will go left due to forces such as torque and P factor and the corkscrew effect of the propeller sending the air back over the rudder. It will cause a left ground loop where you go far enough that the rudder no longer has any aerodynamic effect. At that point, you become a passenger and watch the airplane as it dips down and quite often hits the left wing, the left aileron, and in the worst case, gear come off and it flips over. But so you have to be always on your toes. This can happen almost any time as you start taxi, during taxi, during takeoff, and during landing. That you can ground loop this airplane. Oh, anything else you'd like to know? Is that enough, or
No,
did I cover it?
That's good. Let's move on.
Okay. Now, our particular Stearman is tail number 27933, and it started in Stearman Aircraft Plant in Wichita, Kansas, and was given serial number 41870, and entered the Army Air Corps on November 4th, 1940. It was then assigned to the 62nd Flying Training Detachment in Mississippi Institute of Aeronautics at the Army Airfield Flying Training Command in Jackson Field. Pretty much that's the same stuff on the top line there. And April 1941, it was wrecked in a mid-air collision with another PT-17. So obviously it came out fairly intact, but it did take from April till January 1942 before it got returned to service. November 1943, it was transferred to the 318th Flying Training Detachment, Women's Air Force Service Pilot School Air Training Command, Avenger Army Airfield in Sweetwater, Texas. So that's when this airplane went on to spend almost a year as a Wasp training airplane. You know, they were formed in 1943 and disbanded just prior to the end of the war back in 45. So in August of 44, it was transferred to the Army Air Force Base Unit ATC Pilot School for primary basics at Goodfellow, Army Airfield, Texas. And June of 1945, it was declared excess, transferred to Mustang Field in El Reno, Oklahoma. And in July of 45, it was disposed of as surplus, along with thousands of other aircraft, Stearman. So that was the basic military history of it. Then it went on and into a civilian the civilian world. A few interesting things about what it did on the civilian side. 1945, it was disposed of surplus, and but it took till 1950 for someone to come along and acquire it, and it was Schober Aircraft Salvage Yard. They picked it up, and they sold it off in 1958 to Phil Cooper of West Coast Air Service for just $750. I wish they were that cheap now. Something must have happened there with the West Coast Air Service, because in 1965, a gentleman named Kenneth L. Bemis sold it to satisfy a lien. So obviously something occurred at West Coast Air Service, owed them some money, so he sold it. Well, quite often when something like this happens, the seller can become the purchaser, and that's what happened with Kenneth. He went ahead and bought the airplane back for himself for $360 out of the auction. A year later, he probably had to do some work on it, but he sold it for $3,500, and that's a pretty good profit for that time, to the Community Flying Club of Carthage, Missouri. They then sold it in 1977 to an investment company called J&M, who went ahead and sold it to the Confederate Air Force, and that's when they applied for and got a new N number 27933. I've been asked what the significance of that number is. I really don't know. I couldn't find any information on just why they wanted that one, but they did, and that's what it's been ever since.
So, Keith, sometimes the history on these airplanes can be a little sketchy, but do you know what the airplane was used for after it left military service and before the CAF acquired it?
Well, it was hard to tell, but the general civilian use of it could be almost anything. These Stearman did a lot of work around the country. They were used, a lot of them became crop dusters. They put a tank in it, and they'd go out and do, had a lot of accidents flying low underneath the power lines, crop dusting, and it became a great aerobatic air show aircraft. You'd find them. You can do some very tight loops and turns and stay low to the crowd with this airplane. So and it also has a great radial engine sound. So it did that, and along with the aerobatics, they had wing walkers. You see those in the movies and the videos of those people that brave enough to crawl out of the front cockpit and climb up and do stunts on the wings or go in and out on the wing. And a lot of them were just used to teach people how to fly a tail dragger. They became a primary trainer. So, but there were a lot of people bought them just because they're fun to fly. But as I stated before, they're very unforgiving if you have lost the focus of keeping the airplane under control. So the specifics for our airplane, we don't know. But I'd say since it was a flying club, it was probably just for training and teaching people to fly and flying for fun. So anything else to expound on that?
Sure. This is one of the few Stearmans that never was converted to a crop duster. So, of course, that makes it a little easier for you to do restoration work without having to undo all the modifications that may have been done to make it a crop duster.
Right. And you'll also find that if it was a crop duster, the smell of those chemicals permeates the steel, the fabric, the wood. They can be very smelly airplanes. I actually flew an airplane that had been a cross duster many years ago, and it had been towing gliders for about 10 years, and you still could smell it like it was just spent the day before, especially on a hot summer day. The day before had the smell of the chemicals from when it was a crop duster. So after the civilian time, it moved on. And in 1991, the Confederate Air Force sold the airplane to the American Air Power Heritage Museum. Basically a name change, did it for probably tax purposes and put all the airplanes into one group, the museum. From there, it was 1991 assigned to the Lone Star Wing in Marshall, Texas. Stayed there till 1999. I might say that's when the last recovering restoration was done back there at Marshall. And it was a brand new, freshly done, freshly restored airplane in 1999 when it was reassigned to the DFW wing in Lancaster. The pilot who brought it back from that day was Howard Webb, who was a very active pilot at the time. His wife is still a member of our wing and is our museum curator, and is an extremely knowledgeable person about the history of the wing, the CAF, and the airplanes. Then then last year in December, Joe Sinclair, one of my pilots, flew the airplane to Kansas City for the restoration. And the company that's doing the work is the Restored Aircraft Sales and Service LLC, based at Bashore, Kansas. So that's where the airplane went to get new skin and new paint. So any questions on that, Steve?
No, I think we've got it. We're up to date with where the airplane is, and now we get to find out the rest of the story, as they say.
Okay, I added a little bit about what our new look is going to be. You see there on the top picture, that's a silver colored airplane. It looks a lot like what it would have looked like back in the war era when the Wasp flew it, except something interesting. The Wasps did not have the national star on the wing or the side. It was just pretty much a plain Jane silver airplane. The picture on the right is actually a Wasp pilot getting into what might be U-70, a Stearman, and that's what we're planning on looking like. We have researched, and we are going to try to duplicate exactly what it looked like when the Wasps were flying it. We're not going to add anything that isn't historically accurate. A little bit about the airplane. It's like I said before, it's a 27933, the tail number, and also known as a N2S-1. U-43 will become, as you notice on the right picture, you can see the U, like I said, U-70. We're going to put one of two numbers. We're having a debate of sponsors in the wing right now. There's one group that wants U-43 to go in there and to replace the number 33 we have now. And U-43 is significant in that they want to use that to memorialize the year that it went into the Wasp, so 1943. Now we have a group that are more into the historical accuracy, and they believe U-50 would be more likely a number that was seen on an airplane at Avenger Field. So we'll make the decision when we get right down to the time to paint it and put the markings on it, but it'll either be U-43 or U-50. So, excuse me. The engine we have is a Continental W670-6A, and originally they came with the 650 engine. So that's just a change that, over the years that, the R6, the 670-5 is what I meant to say. There's a R670-5, not the 650. And so we're flying it with a 670-6A. It's a 220 horsepower engine at 2,075 RPM. The original gross weight on these things when they came out of the factory was 2,635 pounds, but the FAA has allowed us to take it up to 2,950. That's significant because people were lighter back in those days. So it allows us to carry a couple of heavier passengers, pilot and passenger, by having the higher gross weight. It'll carry 46 gallons of fuel, which at 14 gallons an hour gives us about a 3-hour or 300-mile in no wind range. And we don't measure our oil in quarts. These radial engines, we put it in by the gallon, and this little airplane takes 4.4 gallons of oil. And if you ever are around a radial and you look on the ground and you don't see a little puddle of oil, you might want to consider it's out of oil, because the joke is if you don't see any oil, there isn't any.
Right.
Because they tend to spit oil out and get it on the windscreen, and it drips out when it's sitting there overnight. So it runs on oil and gas. A lot of people say rather than gas and some oil.
What are some of the other characteristics of the airplane as far as the speeds? You mentioned the range. Just generally, what's it like to fly the Stearman?
Well, when I'm teaching it, I tell people that you climb at 70 and turn final base and land at 70. Cruising speed is around 95 miles an hour. The max speed is considered 120 miles an hour. When you first take off, except maybe on a hot summer day in Texas, it's rated at 800 feet a minute climb. Now the book says it'll go up to 13,300 feet. I don't know why anyone would want to get up that high in this airplane, and I wouldn't even want to try it, but that's what they said it could go to. And a little tidbit, the first flight on the Stearman was in November 26, 1934. So not this airplane, but that was the first Stearman flight ever. And 1935 is when they started selling them. So anything else you want to know, Steve?
No, that's good.
Okay.
And
Well,
I'll just interject if anyone else has questions, just type them in the chat box, and we'll just interject them during the presentation, or we'll have some time at the end if there are any wrap-up questions as well. But just type your question in the box, and we'll keep track of them throughout the presentation. Go ahead, Keith.
Oh, I might add that the height is 9 foot 8 inches high, and to the fuel tank is right up there. If you look on the picture on the right where their head is, the fuel filler tank opening is right behind their head at the top of the airplane, 9 feet 8 inches high. Wingspan is 32 feet 2 inches, and the length is 24 feet 9 inches. Okay. I've added this slide because I think it's kind of interesting. This is Fifinella. The picture on the right is the patch. And if you'll notice at the bottom, it says Walt Disney. And it's also labeled as the Wasp mascot. Well, when the Wasps were being formed, Disney was working on a film and a book entitled Gremlins. And Fifinella was a mischievous gremlin. One of the Wasps, and I'm not sure who it might have been, this one on the right, Dorothy Olson, wrote a letter to Disney and asked if they could have permission to use her as their insignia. And if you look at the jacket she's wearing, you'll see that patch on her left side of her jacket. So she was a gremlin, and the British also used Fifinella for some things, but she was they turned her from a gremlin that went in and did things to airplanes that no one could understand why. They always said back in those days that, you know, what caused the problem? They said it's a gremlin. The British got their gremlins to change their attitude and become patriotic and start helping them win the war. So a little bit of tidbit there. I have a number of patches that once we get the airplane, every rider that pays for a ride in the airplane will get a complimentary patch of Fifinella. So, and along with this, I have another interesting Wasp story. The picture on the left. This is Nell Stevenson Bright. The Texas girl, grew up in Canyon. 19 years old after graduating from A&M, she saw an article about the Army Air Corps looking for women to be pilots, and she wanted to be a pilot. So she went on and had a nice couple years of flying with the Wasps. And on the right, you'll see a picture of her as she is today. And in March of 2010, the Congress awarded the Congressional Gold Medal to the Wasps for their service. But it also took till 1977 for both the House and the Senate to vote in to grant the Wasp military status and make the women's pilot eligible for veterans benefits. And that was only fair because they did every job that you can imagine flying airplanes, and they were killed. Quite a few of them died One famous one was in the midair where a male pilot did a loop around them and clipped her, and then the airplane went in and killed her. So they risked their lives in service to the country, and they deserved all the benefits they got. And we're excited that our airplane was a Wasp airplane, spent the year there while they were training, and helped them learn to fly so they could go on and fly every airframe that the military had, whether it was a fighter, a bomber, an attack airplane. They were there at the controls, moving them around the country and helping let the men go to war. So anything up to that point? Now we're up to the restoration part of the airplane. Steve, anything?
No, let's hear where we're at today.
Okay. We knew our airplane was wearing out. It had been 25 years. We were having some, the paint and the stitching and things started looking kind of raggedy, and we decided it was time to have it done. We didn't have the staff or the facilities in-house to do it, but we got a bid to accomplish the teardown, the recover, and the paint job for $25,000 if there was no major internal or hidden damage and repairs that were needed. We took the airplane, as I said, up to Kansas back in December. And I might add that the high temperature that day when Joe flew was 42 degrees. So that was 5 hours of very cold flying. He got it up there, and almost they weren't going to work on it until February. They got on just to get ready to start it, taking it apart, and COVID hit. Suddenly they had to shut down. They were shut down for a while. Then they had to get the shop ready for working with the COVID protocols. Just one delay after the other. They got behind on aircraft, and they finally got into it a couple months ago. And when they got it opened up, they found quite a bit of hidden problems in the airplane. And basically it comes down to right now, and some of this information is as of the week before Christmas. Was not a good Christmas present for the wing, but 3 of the 4 wings need major work to make them airworthy. And 2 to 3, and right now they're saying it's just going to be 2 wings, might have to be completely replaced because the cost to repair the internal problems, including wood rot and some other things, is more expensive than just going out and buying a replacement. Now, what this has done is more than doubled the original price tag. So originally we were quoted at 25, and now we're north of 50,000 to get the airplane back down to us, ready to fly. And that's, like I said in the headline at the bottom, that's where the 12 planes of Christmas money will be spent, and plus a lot more we'll need to try to access and to get the airplane back into the wing. So our financial obligations for the wing, it looks out almost the entire 2020 income producing events were canceled. We did manage to fly jumpers into the Rockwall 4th of July ceremony, and that was a paid gig. We've dropped jumpers into a veterans program in September. We did skydivers a couple times, once at Lancaster, just because they wanted to jump out of our airplane. We flew over some funerals, the Heroes Memorial Bridge, that picture on the right there. We did a flyover there. For those of you that are eagle eyes, you'll notice those are, well, actually there's 3 T6s and a CJ. They weren't our airplanes, but we got paid to do it. So that was income for our wing. We've been doing as much fundraising as we could. We are happy with the amount of money that has come in, but the increased price tag is well beyond our current fundraising goals. We have kept the wing viable, which I'm happy we're not suffering, but we're keeping the doors open and keeping a couple airplanes flying. We do have a T-41 project that we would like to work on, but I can't spare the money. I have to decide which airplane is more important at the time, because we got to use our assets as wisely as possible. And the T-41, which is the first airplane I ever flew for the Air Force, actually the first airplane I ever flew ever, when I got my wings in the Air Force, I started the T-41 Charlie. And so we need a lot of donations to help get the airplanes finished, and or we may have to put it on hold, put the Stearman on hold too. As far as the 2021 air show season, it's real uncertain right now. I mean, I can't tell what's going on with listening to the news. I don't know whether we'll have everything will open up and everything will be fine, or if they'll have air shows where you sit in your car again, or what. But it's might not be a very active spring. I'm hoping that by summer we have back to full speed and can get our airplanes in air shows and start having them make money. Stearman itself has always been a great income producer on the ride program. It's a very iconic airplane, and people love to fly in it. So, any questions up to there, Steve?
No. Well, actually, one question. You mentioned rides. Has the DFW Wing Stearman, has it been on the Air Power Heritage Tour?
We have not toured. Partly, we have not had the manpower we haven't been able to get people that would be able to go on that. To go on the tour, you have to have people who can take time off, and we just have not had that the last couple of years. But later on, I'll explain a little bit on. Well, I have, now that I'm the instructor, I have checked out a number of people, so that it is possible we could do that and travel around, or at least join up on the tour and work with Nella on the T6. I think that would be a good option to help raise money. So yes, that's a possibility coming up.
Good.
So looking at the goals and objectives, the wing, we look at things like the educating the young people and even adults that don't know anything about the old World War II stuff or flying. The ride program, that's like integral to our financial health. The more rides we do, the more bills we can pay, and keep. It takes a lot to keep airplanes flying. I mean, people look at an airplane and they see it fly for an hour. What they don't realize is every hour that airplane flies, there's many hours of maintenance that takes place overall throughout the year to keep it in the air. And especially when you have an airplane that's 70 years old, it takes a lot of effort to keep those old things running and keep them safe in accordance with the FAA the ride program. We also do community outreach. We're trying to inform the local people in the Lancaster, Dallas area about the airplane. So we're trying to find ways to reach out and work with them. And of course, we're always going to, because we're so excited about this being a Wasp airplane, we're really pushing hard on keeping the history of the Wasp planes alive. So a little bit about education. We want to bring the living history of the Wasp and World War II to the local area. We've reached out to the Civil Air Patrol and have offered to work with them. And every year I present the #1 Civil Air Patrol cadet at the Lakeshore Squadron a free ride in one of our airplanes, and that's a highlight of their year. They're always looking forward to that. They compete to try and get that award because they love coming down to Lancaster and getting that ride. We work with scouts. They come out and they help us when we do our Warbirds on parade. we were in touch with a number of schools. They'll call us up, and we'll reach out to them, and they'll come over. And we've had numerous groups come over and just check out our hangar, go through our museum. There's also a group at the local called the Redbird Squadron, and they're very active in community outreach. And we're in talks with them to, they were looking for a place to have some of their meetings and bringing people. So we've offered to use our hangar to help them. So next is the ride program. Like I said, we travel to air shows to give rides, and there's a lot of revenue that way. In a recent year, before this went up to the restoration place, did 120 rides, which that's quite a few rides when you're only doing them on weekends and predominantly Saturdays. We will do our rides at the Lancaster Airport every Saturday, and also I'm retired, and I will come down there and give the ride by appointment anytime during the week. Some interesting things that happened at the last Wings Over Dallas. I got to fly with a 99-year-old gentleman named Colin Stewart Bell, who was a British Mosquito pilot. And he told me the last time he flew the PT-17 was in 1941. He has an interesting backstory too. He was here in the US getting trained before Pearl Harbor. He was supposed to go straight back to England and to the war. Well, once Pearl Harbor hit and we entered the war, he stayed and became a flight instructor here in the US in the PT-17. And after they helped get the British flying schools up to speed, he went back and did his Mosquito flying, and he's still active. Last I checked, he's pushing 100, and he's working as a surveyor, and he goes out to the field, and he's one of those very, very active people. He's always doing something. I also had the privilege of flying the wife of the CEO of United Airlines. I did a video movie for her. She was excited, and from what I understand, she's told me she's shown that to a number of her friends over the years. I've given rides to riders from 12 to 99, and they've loved the sounds and the smells. I mean, it sounds funny, but the smell of the burning oil and the exhaust from the engine, it comes back near you in the cockpit. You got this air blowing over your head, the noise, the vibration. It's no matter how hesitant or apprehensive they've been before they get in, everyone that gets out has what I call the Stearman smile. They can't stop smiling about what they just encountered, what they just saw, what they felt, what they heard. And then we can, I can put a GoPro on the wing and film it, so they can get a movie. I make a 8-minute movie that shows them everything from the start to shutdown of the ride, and they really like that too. So after the ride program, community outreach. Actually, a picture on that side is me giving a cadet his award for being the #1 cadet at the Lakeshore Squadron. We've had a lot of groups of schools that have from the South Dallas area that have shown up and come to our hangar and the museum, and we love to entertain them, show them around, let them sit in the airplanes, go in and out of our R4D, and sit in the Stearman. Quite often you'll have the hangar. It's an active working hangar, so they'll see what's going on there. The Redbird Squadron, like I said earlier, is a great program, and we'd like to piggyback with them and use their connections with the community and try to get a little more action and activity from the locals. In the past, we had a real good Black History Month program that kind of has fallen by the wayside at headquarters. So I would like to restart that up in our hangar and try to get another Black History Month program and invite some of the local schools to come through our our area, and check us out for that too. So STEM, everybody knows that's important. You know, that's can't fly an airplane without having a good basic understanding of the science, technology, and and all the math that you need as a pilot. So our museum officer, Elaine, has a great hands-on education program. She's been at a number of places, including the Wings Over Dallas, and everyone loves her little cart that has things that she can show, what a weight and balance and flight controls, and brings in the idea of what you need to know to fly an airplane. And when they do come to the hangar, they get to see the aircraft with maintenance, and it's really amazing you see an airplane like in the background of this picture. There's the BT. Well, if you went there right now, that BT has no skin on it. We have everything opened up because we're doing the annual, and they get to look and see what happens when you move the yoke or the stick, depending on the airplane, and what moves what and how it moves, and however the insides of an airplane. So get a lot of kids that really enjoy seeing that. Adults too. I enjoy this group here. They were so much fun. That little gentleman with the sunglasses, he was a hoot. I had a great time with him. He just loved getting his hands into everything. So basically, that gets us to the end of my death by PowerPoint. Sorry, I don't know if you don't know, that's kind of a military term. That
I'm familiar with that. One of the things that you pointed out with flying the airplane and doing the rides program is the fact that it's not only just the ride, but it's also the sights, the smell, the entire experience that really sets a ride in a CAF Warbird apart from obviously from any other general aviation activity or even airlines. So it really is an immersive experience, no matter which of the airplanes you fly.
Oh, correct. Yeah, and we, like I said, we've had so many different people, and whether they're seasoned pilots with lots of hours who've never been in a Warbird or a biplane or a tail dragger, or somebody that's never been in an airplane, we get them all. And I don't, like I said, in all the years I've been flying people, I've never had anyone who hasn't had that smile on them and enjoyed the ride immensely. And knock on wood, I have never had anyone get sick yet.
Well, you know what they say, just like ground loops. It might be inevitable, but good track record so far.
Yep.
You're seeing the part of your web page, and there's the donate button there. You can also donate to the airplane through the 12 Planes of Christmas on the main CAF website. And again, that's what we're not only telling the story of the airplane, but also, where you are in the restoration, and you need some help and some support to help bring the airplane back to flight and back to the Dallas area.
Yes. Yes. At DFWwing.com. You can't really see it on there, but yeah, it's very simple. DFWwing.com is that website, and has the donate button. Glad to have you come by anytime, any Saturday. We're there 9 to 5, every day of the year, unless it falls on a holiday. And if it's some holidays, we're out flying airplanes somewhere else at an air show.
Well, and that's one of the questions I had when you were talking about the hangar and having people in. Are there any special protocols that you've had to institute with COVID to keep the hangar open to visitors?
Well, we try to maintain social distancing. We have a hand sanitizer area. We have complimentary masks if you forget them, and it's a pretty open area. So it's not like you're going in and sitting at a table next to people. Everybody can keep their distances, and so basically just common sense activities. Stay away from people. Keep your mask on. And wash your hands, sanitize your hands. We've got a setup right there at the front of the hangar where they can grab that. we really haven't had too many people because of COVID, but we do get them, they do come in, and if we're doing a ride, it's not like we're having a plane load, a 737 load of people. It's one passenger, and so other than the close contact, when they do the closest we come to somebody is when they do the briefing for the ride, when you're having to show them the seatbelt and the headset and the push to talk button, things like that. And then we just try to limit our touching as much as possible.
Well, a few of the questions that have come in during the presentation, does your Stearman have an electric starter?
Okay, say that again.
Does your Stearman have an electric start?
Oh, yes. We have an electric starter. So just push a button and it spins the prop and it fires right up. I know the Corpus Christi Stearman down there, I think I checked them out. If I remember correctly, they have to use a crank, the centrifugal arm to fire up their Stearman. Because I flew that a while back, but the Lone Star one, they have an electric starter also. So yes, we do.
All right, and what about avionics in the airplane? Obviously, you've upgraded to more modern technology than World War II.
Well, barely. The only thing that we've had to really put in our Stearman, which is modern, is the ADSB. It's the new transponder that is required. We're located for those pilots, we're in what they call the Mode C Veil. We're under Class Bravo. We're required to have this new transponder, ADSB. So we have a transponder and ADSB, and that's it on this Stearman. Our navigation is either iPhone or iPad on your knee or and handheld. It's old school in the Stearman. If you look at the cockpit, there's not much room. It's pretty much looks just like it did back in the 1940s.
All right, here's a kind of esoteric question. What, in your opinion, what is the difference between flying a biplane and a monoplane?
Well, I guess what I would say is let's see, somehow I would say an airplane's an airplane. You pull the stick back, it goes up, and push it forward, it goes down, right and left. It might, depending on the airplane, it's the wingspan and the power. When you're talking about these World War II planes, it's going to be more, just a little bit of response time would be all I would say. And the vision, with a Stearman, you have a wing above you and below you, so you have a harder time seeing all the aircraft around you because you have your vision is blocked in a couple different directions. Whereas a low wing airplane, you can clear the sky pretty good. You just can't see straight down. So there's really, I've flown a lot of different types of airplanes, and they all have their quirks and personalities, but I don't know if I would say there's a lot of difference between them. I get in, I just, the four forces act on an airplane the same: the lift, the thrust, the drag, and the weight. That works. And the biggest difference is whether it's a tail dragger or a tricycle type airplane would be for taxi and takeoff and landing. That's where you get the big changes between the two different types of wheels, whether it's a tail dragger or a tricycle.
All right. Why are some? This gets into paint schemes. We talked about the gray that you're going to put your Stearman in when it comes out, but then there's also the yellow and red Stearmans. What's the significance between the different paint schemes?
Well, the Navy, I believe, tended to use yellow, and therefore the nickname of their Stearman was Yellow Peril. Again, it refers to the number of people that crashed them and died in them. Like I said, they'd throw people in these airplanes and say, "Here, go fly." after just a few hours of training, and then if they made it. So that's yellow was Navy, and then the gray was for the. They started off the war with different colors. When we first started the war, there was basically what paint did you have around that you could paint an airplane, and then as it progressed, then they started to standardize it, and then the silver became part of the requirement for, they tried to standardize the paint scheme. So the yellow and blue scheme was, or I think early in the war, and then they came along later. Again, I haven't thought about this. I've read it. I'm not 100% sure, but I think that's has something to do with it. When they standardized it, they tried to tell everybody, after a while, they got the bureaucrats out there and started making the regs thicker and thicker. And they started telling everybody what to do, down to the fine detail. At first, it was just get an airplane, get it out there, and paint it the color, whatever color you needed to paint it.
How many pilots currently fly the airplane, and how many sponsors do you have for it?
Well, right now I'm the instructor and the pilot. I have another gentleman who's flying it named Matt Case. He's a private pilot, and I'm hoping he'll get his commercial soon. Joe St. Clair, he flies it. He's a 737 pilot for Southwest, and Dave Townsend's an engineer over at L3, and not L3, Lockheed, and so that's the four. I've got a couple people in line to get checked out on as soon as we get it back. So I think as soon as, not long after we get it back, I'll have a total of 6 sponsors. There's 25 years of sponsors. So I don't know the exact number, but a sponsor that sponsored 25 years ago is on the list, just like the sponsor who sponsored last summer. So I've seen the list over there at headquarters. It's quite long. I wouldn't even venture to guess the numbers. Active sponsors for voting purposes, we have the 4 pilots, and there's probably a half a dozen others that have an interest in it who have sponsored the airplane that aren't flying or aren't pilots. So I don't have those exact numbers right now.
Okay. Well, that's a good ballpark estimate, and also as you mentioned, with this Stearman, with many of the CAF aircraft, there have been sponsors for many years who have helped keep them flying, as it were.
Right, and you don't have to be a pilot to sponsor the airplane. A sponsorship is $1,500, so you can get yourself a sponsorship for the airplane, and the headquarters will send you a plaque that lists you as a sponsor, and we will give you a free ride in the airplane if you sponsor, a free 1-hour ride that goes along with your sponsorship and the patch. So there are a couple other perks that goes with sponsoring the airplane if you're not a pilot. Now, you have to sponsor the airplane if you are a pilot and want to fly it. So we won't let somebody who hasn't been a sponsor get in the airplane and fly it. So that's there's two ways of sponsoring it, basically in line to be a pilot, or just to be an aircraft sponsor, and they know that you're helping keep a World War II airplane flying.
What are, just in general, the requirements that a pilot would need? If someone was a private pilot with some tail dragger experience, what kind of hours or experience do you need to work your way up to, say, the Stearman?
Okay, they just changed 60-1, but it had been, you have to have a commercial license. You don't have to come out. Sorry, that's only do rides. You have to have 200 hours. You have to have 25 hours of tail dragger time in the last year and 80 tail dragger landings in the last year, of which some of that can be counted in training. So that's the minimums. If you were just a 200-hour Cessna 172 guy and had just started flying tail draggers, I would not let you, and that you wouldn't be able to get in the airplane and fly it, because it's one of the 2 airplanes that the CAF has that has the highest incident rate. So what we want to make sure is your experience before you get in. It's like I said, I had 25,000 hours when I got in the Stearman, 1,000 hours of tail dragger time, and it still made me a humble person trying to get checked out on that airplane. Again, you can't lose focus for 1 second, or else it will take you somewhere you don't want to go.
All right, Keith. Well, we've just a couple of minutes left. Any final thoughts as we wrap up our session for tonight?
Well, I'd like to say thanks for inviting me over here. The DFW wing would, really appreciates being featured like this. I would hope that we can get enough donations that can keep this airplane in the air. We will do our best to keep it flying, and yes, come down to the hangar at any time on Saturday, 9 to 5. Call us, call and check us out. Check out the website there, dfwwing.com. We also have a Facebook page that you can keep track of us and see how what's going on at the hangar. Try to post activities and plans. If you get your email to me, I can put you on an email list. I put out it's almost bi-weekly thing called Wing Notes. And it's just a short, usually 1-page summary of what's going on and a little bit about what's going to happen. And you can keep up with us that way. So anyway, that's it. I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight, and thank all you listeners who are here live or watching this on YouTube. Thank you for tuning in.
Well, thank you, Keith, and good luck with the restoration of the Stearman. Hopefully we can help generate some donations through the 12 Planes of Christmas or through your website, and look forward to seeing that beautiful Stearman back in the air over Lancaster in the Dallas area. And again, if you're in the Dallas area, check them out. They're at the Lancaster Airport. Keith, again, thank you for joining us. Have a great evening. And as Keith said, I'll echo his sentiment. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Have a good night.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And Happy New Year.